Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Our webinar today will explore our health and wellbeing, and I have the pleasure in introducing McCreath, who's the founder and director of Lifestyle and Wellness. So at today's webinar, Anne will discuss the importance of how the impact of external influences has an impact inside us from a health and wellbeing perspective. And as an introduction to Anne, Anne comes from a clinical background which has enhanced her desire to dedicate her career to improving individuals' quality of life. And Anne is passionate about the impact that health and well-being has on individuals and businesses. And due to her success, she is a co-author on a range of award-winning guided self-care books. So we have the pleasure in sharing also today that Anne is one of our newest members of the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce. So we're super excited to welcome you to our chambers, Anne. It's lovely that you're able to join us. So in a moment, I'll hand over to Anne, but similar to other webinars, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to put these in the questions in the chat function below, or raise your hand in the attendee list section. And Alan Busby, as you can see, is also on the call today. So between Alan and myself, we'll collate any questions and share with Anne after her presentation. So Anne, if you want to start, I'll hand it over to you, and Anne will be sharing her slides after the presentation and also some reading material. So just sit back and relax. Okay, thank you, Anne.
Nice. Thank you, Evelyn. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your day today to join this particular session. As Evelyn has shared, I come from a clinical background, but now working within business. So I am a registered mental health nurse, accredited cognitive behaviour psychotherapist as well. But the purpose of this session this afternoon is to really take the principles of the skills that I've learned and put them into a package for individuals to use as life skills day to day in order to build resilience and maintain wellness. Now, I do teach very informally, and I really do want you guys, as Evelyn has suggested, to kind of sit back and relax. So just with that in mind, I'm just about to share, hopefully, some slides. With that in mind, just before we do that, hopefully at the end of this particular session, these would be the three main takeaways that I would like for you to have. I often say if you met somebody after the session and they asked you, you know, what was the session about? These would be the three main takeaways from that. So you may already have an understanding of certain approaches around health and wellbeing, evidence-based approaches, such as the two mentioned in the first bullet point, cognitive behaviour therapy and present moment awareness, which is mindfulness. So hopefully this session will help you to build on your understanding and knowledge of those two evidence-based approaches. Also, we will be taking those principles from those approaches and understanding more on how you can build that day to day within your self-care. So not just for when you have life difficulties, it really from a proactive point of view as well, just using them because it's a good thing to do to maintain good wellness. Also, we'll do some practice in this session. Not sure if you've done that in any of the webinars before, but if we're talking about life skills, then for me it's great to capture that practical experience. So we're going to practice some mindful breathing if you're up for that. And also we'll finish off with just this idea of planning, trying to gather and cultivate a sense of, well, that's great, but how is that going to look like in my typical day or day-to-day, moment to moment. So hopefully those would be the key takeaways from this session. But if you're anything like me, and probably most of the panel that have already been speaking to you, this may be what your mind, your headspace looks like at the moment. Certainly was mine yesterday. Today is a wee bit less busy than that. So I'm going to ask you just to take a moment where you are in your space just now and just consider and reflect just on how your day has gone today. So I'm just going to take you through just a kind of almost a visualization that's not with eyes closed at this stage, but really just thinking for a moment of all the things that you've had to function to do, before you've even sat down to listen to this session. So have you been participating in work? Are you at your work? Are you at home? Have you attended to other individuals in your life, other relationships, pets, children, all of that? Have you had to respond to emails, messages, posts, indeed that required a lot of attention, or perhaps some concern, or perhaps some planning, and everything else in between? And by that I'm meaning, maybe you're living day to day with physical pain or a pre-existing medical condition. But very rarely do we ever stop. I mean, I'm probably taking a good guess that none of us have actually stopped at this point in our day until now to perhaps just consider all of the things that we've kind of been cramming into our minds, but that actually plays out and impacts in other areas of our body. So that's what we're going to look at. But before we do get into the content of it, I'm going to invite you to just settle in to your seated bones. Now that's the way I always describe this, because often, there's lots around when you're kind of learning, and particularly these life skills, that there has to be set conditions for that. And whilst all of that is lovely, it's not necessary. So I would just say is just be present, find a comfortable position in your chair, settle in as the skeleton shows, perhaps maybe not in the lotus position, but just whatever's comfortable for you. And sometimes it can be helpful just to close your eyes. If you're comfortable doing that, just do that for a wee moment. If you'd prefer not to do that, just allow your eyes to kind of rest its gaze, their gaze, just on something really soft in front. So just that could be a door handle, it could be a mug on a table, it could be just anything, just so that your eyes aren't straining. Just allow them to gently relax. And if you've got your eyes closed, that's great. And nothing magical is about to happen. I'm not about to guide you through a huge, long meditation here, but what I want to do is just get you to kind of almost allow that previous slide of all the busyness just to kind of settle. And regardless if your eyes are opened or closed at this point, all I'm going to ask you to do is just again reflect on your day until you have arrived here for this session. Just reflecting over all the things that you've done. All the things as you woke to breakfast time, from breakfast time to mid-morning, and mid-morning to perhaps lunch, and then now. And quite often we don't take the time to reflect and think about the thoughts that we've had, the way that we've spoke to ourselves, talked to ourselves across the morning. And equally, we may not even have checked in just to recognise any physical discomfort or tension and pain even, or the opposite, to notice that the body's actually feeling relaxed. And again, just checking in on our actions, our behaviours, responses, and just taking a moment to again reflect on all of those that we've participated in up until this point today. Getting organised, getting ready, feeding ourselves, feeding others, and so on. And just before we finish this short segment, I'm going to ask you just to take a moment to recognise, where do you notice your breath? Where do you breathe from? And that might sound a bit strange, but often people don't always recognise their breathing from their mouth. It could be their nose. It may even be their upper chest, their tummy, sometimes their toes. So just take a wee moment, eyes closed or eyes open, and note, just observe, just be aware where your breath is just now. And just taking a wee moment to thank your breath, because without that functioning in the background, getting on with things, you know, you might and wouldn't have been able to carry out all of what you've done until right now. Now we're just about to stop, but before you open your eyes, I'm going to just suggest that you allow a little amount of light in through the bottom of your eyelids if your eyes are closed, and then just very gently allow them to open. And now, just with that picture in mind, with the seated bones, just allow yourself a wee stretch, a yawn, anything you want to do. If you've got a hot drink there, a glass of water, just stretch for that. And hopefully that's kind of setting the scene. I've delivered lots of workshops, lots of training across the years, but for me, it's very nice to kind of start that learning, get folk on the same page, with just allowing the kind of settlement, if you like. We're all coming to this session today with different, various things going on in life, and particularly that's been made more difficult across recent months for all of us. So it's quite nice just to take that moment, which was less than 2 minutes really from start till finish, and we all have that in our day. So just moving on with the content from the session. What we're recognising is that often what is happening in our outside world absolutely impacts on us, but are we really aware, are we really conscious of where inside is the outside world impacting? And it's human behaviour to want to problem solve all the things that are going on in our outside world. Examples of that are financial difficulties, relationships. It could even be practical problems such as something wrong with a car or DIY in the house, or just collecting medication for someone. It could be a range of things. These are all the things that go on in our outside world. I would call them life events, life experiences. But they absolutely have a direct impact on any individual on inside. And often what we try to do though is solve the problems outside first. We're really missing a great first step, which is to kind of not do that and actually go within and recognise inside the areas where you do have control over things. So just to summarise, often we have little or no control over the life experiences and events that are kind of dealt to us in life. But where we do have control are kind of almost like 4 areas within us, 4 quadrants within us. We absolutely have more control over them, and we'll look more at that within this session. Why do this? Well, for me, it's in my experience, and I think just generally for most folk in life, you know, building life skills of any nature is obviously a very healthy thing to do, and we all probably have had even more experience of this, again, across recent months. But I think it's very good to look at the skills that you are learning, and obviously coming from the background that I'm in, I'm very interested in evidence-based approaches, and of course the two that I really do kind of lean towards and have seen amazing results from is CBT and mindfulness. Now, why use those 2 approaches? Well, for me, they really do have metrics attached to them, so you're able to measure and see progress, whether that's in a score or whether that's in a mood, just in terms of a feeling and so on. But also, these 2 approaches are crucial in terms of right now, the here and now in your life. It's not about using stuff to go back and look at things from past. It's about, this is where I am. These are the things I'm wanting to focus on. And so for me, using these 2 evidence-based approaches are really good techniques, good ways of building on just general life skills and keeping well, and a very proactive measure. Now, of course, I want to put this in, being a nurse, I want to just also share that the evidence base for both these approaches and their principles is very much mentioned within our governing body for all things health and wellbeing, which is the NICE guidelines. So the clinical evidence, the science is all there, and they are recommended. Yes, they're recommended for when we have difficulties in life, but also recommended from a proactive prevention point of view, which is why I use them a lot in all the teaching that I do. So both of them cross over in these 3 areas, which would be your thoughts, your behaviours and your emotions. Now, all human beings have these areas as interconnectedness. So what you say to yourself, i.e. your thoughts, has a direct impact on how you're going to respond, how you're going to react, which is your behaviour, like the things you do, the things you don't do, and the things that you might avoid. And all of that moves towards a certain emotion, a mood state as well. So it's all interconnected. But the good news is, if you've got great things going on in your life, or life is just generally okay, that's because you're talking to yourself in that nature, you're responding and reacting accordingly, hence the reason why you are feeling good, feeling that way. But it's a very good first step to step back and recognise why do I feel the way I do? And say to yourself, well, what is it I'm saying to myself? What's my inner radio station, my inner running commentary? Because that's all your thoughts. And also recognise, well, what is it I'm doing as a result of what I'm saying and how I'm feeling? What is it I'm not doing as a result of what I'm saying and how I'm feeling? And also, what am I avoiding as a result of the things I say and how I'm feeling? These are great awareness tips. To make any change, you've got to first start with cultivating awareness. And this is a great first tool to start off with. All of our outside life impacts in these areas. So it's a wise person that gets in tune and gets to know these cornerstones of us inside. Now, this is my own analogy and my own way of teaching and explaining this. So to me, like everybody talks about, I'm juggling, I'm spinning plates. So to me, I quite like that idea, because I feel sometimes, we are running between these things, and also we get dished up things in life. Life is a lovely way of dishing up things that maybe we've expected and maybe we've planned for, but it also has an unpleasant way of dishing up sometimes unexpected, unwanted, and uninvited things in life. So on the screen, you'll see some examples of that. So there may be some great relationships that you have been dished up across your life, but equally there may have been some family worries and concerns and loss that you've been dished across life too. But that dish isn't just generally, it's also moment to moment and day to day. So you might be served up a worry first thing in the morning about work, and that might resolve itself come lunchtime. But again, perhaps maybe there's an underlying health issue for you, and that's what's causing you the spinning plates in that particular day. So it's so important to recognise that what you have on your plate, not just generally, that's one side of it, but actually breaking that down and learning the skill of what's on my plate today. And I know we say, I know you've got a lot on your plate, do you mind doing this, do you mind doing that? But actually for you to kind of build that own self-awareness and say, right, actually what do I have on my plate today? And break it down into these kind of areas as well, to recognise, right, that makes sense, why I'm saying this to myself, why I'm behaving in this way, and ultimately why I'm feeling this way. So the plate analogy for me fits lovely, because you have these 4 cornerstones as well that is so important. This is where you have more control over than you do in your outside world. If you become more aware and more in tune of the crown of your head down to the tips of your toes, your physical body, day to day and just generally, that's a great life skill. If you become more in tune with your actions, your responses, what you do, don't do, or avoid, that's another great life skill. Also your thoughts. Again, inside, I always call that your inner commentary, your inner radio station. What are you tuning into? What's the sound of that like? What's the tone of that like? But crucially, what is the language? What language do you use when you talk to yourself? For example, let's say maybe perhaps you've gone back to work this week, and some of the language you may have used towards yourself would be more critical, more fearful, more worried type words, language that you might use. And maybe perhaps not quite appreciating how impactful that can be on the way that you respond, how you feel, and obviously your physical body. So all of that serves up life. So all these things inside feed out to your outside world, and we know that. So if you are not feeling great and you're not talking to yourself in a manner that's encouraging and motivating, and or at least calming, or showing kindness, then we understand that that's going to feed out when we go to work, when we're in relationships with people, when we're dealing with family, money, and so on. So seeing the plate there, but always being aware, no matter what the dish of the day is in terms of life experiences, the four cornerstones are always spinning on the outside. So rather than going in and getting caught up in all the experiences and the moments that has been dished up, just take that step back and look at the four areas, and perhaps it's at that point you say, well, I can't stop the thoughts, they're very intense just now, and actually the actions is I've been, I've lost my temper with somebody, or I'm very frustrated with somebody. But maybe what you can do is actually focus on the physical body. So that might be going for a walk, that might be sitting down and just getting in tune with your breathing, it could be anything. So just recognising and remembering the plate analogy is a fantastic life skill and a great first step in terms of your own day-to-day wellness. So one area that we talked there about and I'd mentioned about was the thinking. Just to reiterate and recap, that's the way you talk to yourself. That's your inner radio station, your inner running commentary. Now, if you are very aware, or you're building your awareness, your sharpness, your focus on the way that you are in this area of you inside, again, another fantastic life skill. It can actually be fun as well. I mean, I know I can catastrophize, but I've learned in adult life to dial it down. So what I'm not saying is that you practice these tools and techniques and forevermore you never talk unhelpfully to yourself or negatively to yourself. That's not the case. But what you'll notice is you dial it down. So it might be more of a bit of a lull in the background, which is great because then it gives airspace to encourage more helpful ways of talking to yourself and showing a bit more kindness and encouragement. Now, there are quite a few bullet points on the slide that you're looking at just now. I would summarise this by saying it's like a menu, cherry pick from it. You don't need to follow the top one down to the bottom one. So if you want to, as a first step, build on your awareness of any unhelpful thoughts that you might have, first step might be just figuring out, right, who was there, what happened, why might I have been talking in that nature, and again, when was it and where, write down. So it's almost like a detective, a bit of a spy, and really getting into the nitty gritty of maybe that thought. And that's all you might ever want to do. Other folk might find it more helpful just saying to themselves, will this thought really matter in 6 months' time, 6 weeks' time? And sometimes in my case, it's like, will it matter in 6 minutes' time? So it really is putting things in perspective. Again, this is on your slide to go back to after this particular session. So I'll not go through them all, but again, just to summarise on this particular one, it's great, it's a menu. You practice them, get into the way of cherry picking and finding out what works best for you. Ultimately, all or one or two, depending on what you choose, do help in some way to reaching a more realistic and balanced way of thinking. And that's very important to stress. This is not teaching you to have magical thinking and perfect, healthy thinking moment to moment. It's just reaching realistic perspectives and also balanced thinking as well. Basically reaching thoughts that don't have the ability to overpower and control the way you feel. And that's the way you're able to measure it and recognise it, that when a thought is loud again and you hear it there, you're then able to say, well, actually, on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 before that used to get me really frustrated, angry or fed up or low. Actually, on a scale of 0 to 10 now, having practiced 2, 3 or 4 of these particular bullet points, I'm now recognising that thought is down at a 3 or a 4. And it's great. And sometimes that changes day to day, but that's fine. Again, great life skill, great self-awareness. We talked about our actions as well in the plate analogy, and sometimes that's maybe an easier area to tackle rather than thinking, if thinking is quite extreme and unhelpful and overwhelming. Our behaviours can really be almost split into these 3 categories in my view anyway. So it can be really good just to step back in a moment and say, when things aren't going great in life, okay, since this happened, have I started doing anything that's out of character for me? Have I stopped doing things that are kind of good for me? And also, have I started to avoid things that I know really would help me grow and flourish as an individual? Now, by gaining answers to those three questions, that's your starting point for making change and altering behaviour. And again, equally, just like thoughts, that just doesn't happen overnight. But with small, tiny wins each day, by changing different wee habits and actions that we kind of default to, is another great life skill. It really is. It's a great way of kind of managing things. And what's nice about this is the more you become aware of it, you kind of say to yourself, right, great, I didn't really realise there's so much more I can turn this around. So if you can ask yourself, what have I started doing since I've gone back to work and have been anxious, since things have started to open back up again? You might be able to, out of answers from that, to be able to say, well, I'm very aware of my breathing, I'm very aware of hand washing, I'm very aware of other people in my personal space, I'm very aware of when I go over the threshold of my own front door in terms of contamination and things like that. So if you notice that you're starting to do things and think things as well, then that's a great spot to say, right, what one is so unhelpful that I could spend time on dialing down a wee bit or swapping for something more helpful. And of course, the other areas that you have control over really is how you feel. I've always said this since being in the world of CBT, is that the minute I put my toes on the floor in the morning, I have a choice how I feel. I have a choice the way I want to talk to myself. It's my choice. Yes, life is going to throw curveballs, and there's no getting away from that, and there's no way of dressing that up any differently. But for me, I have a choice how I want to respond to that, how I want to talk about that, how I want to feel about that. And even just saying that, thinking that, being mindful of that when you wake in the morning is great. But in terms of emotions, I've kind of popped for the purpose of this session, just some things that I know work, and I know that other people have found really useful and could be very useful, particularly again in this current climate. So when you're getting in touch with how you're feeling and all of your emotions, some individuals find it really useful to attach that to a colour. So again, if you're measuring that, you would have a strip of colours, and obviously from dull to very bright. And you can measure that moment to moment, chunks of your day, or just generally across the week, whatever works for you. And again, obviously emojis and things like that are very good too. Also, in terms of your physical body, and you're going to get a chance to practice this just shortly, is breathing practices. So I always say, thank goodness I don't need to remind myself to breathe, because it just gets on with it, because it would be fatal for all of us. So again, just getting in and getting in tune with your physical breath is so important. I always say it's a superpower. It really is. Also for your physical body, and we will all know this, all of us that have joined here today, movement. And I always say movement instead of exercise, because any movement moves circulation, which in turn affects all the endorphins, the happy chemicals. So even if it is just movement from sitting to standing, into another room, to the garden, to out to the bin, to empty the bins, just to kind of see if these short things in the short term help to kind of move your mood, anything like that is fantastic. And in terms of rating scales, I guess for even any physical sensations or any pain or just discomfort, tension, any of that, simply just jotting down on a piece of paper, 0 to 10. 10 feeling really great, or 10 feeling, like no pain at all, and 0 being, lots, not feeling good at all, really flat, wanting to go, spend time resting, all of these kind of things. You decide what that scale is in terms of the measurement. Keep it simple, 0 to 10, moment to moment, rate that. Why am I suggesting the kind of metric side, the measurement side? Because it's so important to know if you are maintaining, you are improving and progressing, or if you are going the opposite end, and to recognise, okay, well, I'm going to need more support for this, or great, that's been 2 weeks, I've been processing this and it's working out for me and I'm enjoying it, I'm seeing the difference, and of course able to share with other people as well. So just to summarise, we looked at the thinking, and we talked about the bullet points of all the different aspects to choose from. Just see that slide as a menu, cherry pick from that. We also talked about actions, your responses, your behaviours. What have I started doing? What have I stopped doing? What am I avoiding? And the answers you'll retrieve from those personal questions will give you a starting point to turn things around. And finally, emotions and physical. So to sum these two up, again, get into the way of measurement scales. 0 to 10, emotions or colours. Great ways for personal well-being. Hopefully you're all still here and not an automatic pilot. And really what that I mean is that I do, if I'm listening to somebody, whether that's physically in a lecture or a session, a training session, a workshop, or on webinars, you are thinking of things, you get distracted, you're kind of when we all default to automatic pilot. But if we're actually really going to start to bring in the mindful, or as I call it, the present moment awareness kind of skills for our day-to-day and well-being, then it's another great way of getting more acuteness, more focus, more awareness of when we start to default to automatic pilot. I mean, just think for a wee minute, for those of you that drive, have you ever reached a destination and thought, how the heck did I get here? But you were driving. It's quite scary. But the point I'm trying to make is that we get so ingrained with something that we've learned, the skill of driving, that we just know it back to front, left, all of that, and we get there. And we don't really stop to kind of focus on the journey, focus on the moment to moment. Now, again, why is that important? Well, the science and the evidence base behind practicing and cultivating present moment awareness is huge now. And, not least does it help to improve your concentration, your awareness and your focus, but also that then lovely feeds into your outside world. So anybody that's coming into contact with you, you're able to deploy those skills. So whether it's an email to somebody, a text message to somebody, a conversation with somebody, all of that is enhanced because you have paid more attention in a more mindful way, present way. So just with this in mind, for me, again, just very, very simply, try and just see that mindfulness in itself, at the core of mindfulness and present moment awareness, really is recognising that your breath is so important. If you can kind of get in tune with that, recognise it. Listen, if you can consciously breathe for 60 seconds every day, you're onto a winner. That's a win-win. And that's a very easy, simple thing to do. So start with practicing your breathing, notice it, notice where it goes and notice where it flows. And then apply that to activities that you carry on and carry out through your day. That could be anything like holding the steering wheel of a car, making a cup of coffee, in the shower, a conversation with somebody, putting your shoes on, getting order. It can be absolutely anything. But again, like I said, where you go, your breath goes. So if you can first start with breathing and then allow that to kind of weave into all your different activities, you absolutely will notice the difference. Your physical body also will thank you for that, because at a cellular level, your body is always listening. So if heart rate's working at the rate it's meant to, if your digestive systems are all flowing in the way that they're meant to, at a cellular level, your body is going to thank you for that. Other things that you'll notice improve are things like sleep. So, it's a great life skill to practice and really cultivate day to day and to share with other people too. Now, this is less scientific. This is the kind of Anne McCreath way of communicating principles of present moment awareness. So I like to refer to that as the lead, the spy, and the leaky pot. So if we start with the last one, our heads are like leaky pots, just like the second slide in that when we all settled in before we started the session. So there's a gazillion things in our minds that we're having to either carry out or having to remember, it might be fearful from, and so on. So give yourself a wee bit of a break. That's never going to stop. But what we can do is not get caught up in it. Practice trying to just kind of take that wee step back. If we do that in practice, what you'll notice is your day-to-day, you'll start to do that, sometimes without even recognising, which is fabulous. So this idea of the leaky pot, we're going to practice some mindful breathing just shortly. The aim is not to stop your thoughts. The aim is just to notice them. So that's the next point up, which is the spy. Your task, I'm tasking you with the mission of just being the spy, almost a bit like Columbo, just on the side, watching any thoughts that come in, not getting caught up in that, just noticing. And you know, it's just a thought. Even if you want to say that to yourself, it's just a thought, and then come back to the breath. Now I call that the lead. When I was learning mindfulness, it was a Buddhist monk that had said often our minds can be a wee bit like puppy dogs. They want to go off and it want to tell you, though, this is what you're having for your dinner, and remember so and so, you need to phone so and so. But like with a puppy, you would use a lead, and you would train that puppy with the lead to kind of keep it out of danger, show it the things you want to train it, show it the more healthier way of how you want to grow and nourish and get it to flourish. Well, you're no different. So I'm going to ask you throughout this next process is to focus on your breathing, and that's your lead. So every time you're going to get distracted by all these different thoughts and conversations, just spy on it, just be aware of it, but use the lead to come back to your breathing. And I'll just guide you to do that as well. So if you're up for it, if you're not, by all means, sitting off your tea or your water and you know, just pause for the next couple of minutes. But if you're absolutely up for it, I'm going to invite you to, just like we did before, settle into your seated bones. So again, just allow yourself to reposition in your chair. It could be a stretch, it could be a yawn. All I would say at this stage now is to try and support from your elbow to your fingertips, only because they can sometimes feel a wee bit uncomfortable, a wee bit heavy if you're not supporting them. So it could just be in the arm of a chair, it could be in your lap. Just do whatever is comfortable for you. And again, there's it's not necessary to have the spine in a certain position. Some of you may not even be able to do that anyway. So just settle into your seated bones, whatever's comfortable for you. And I'm going to ask you, if you're comfortable enough, again, close your eyes. Ideally, that would be great. And if not, just allow your gaze to rest upon something in front of you. So again, door handle, a mug, could just be a pattern on the carpet, anything, just so that the eyes are not feeling strained and heavy. And at this point, just allow yourself to relax. And I'm going to invite you to notice your breathing. Not change it, not interrupt it. Just notice it. Go to where your breath is. Is it your nose, your mouth, upper chest, tummy, stomach, your feet? Notice your own breath. Where does it go? Where does it flow? And taking a moment just to appreciate that it does everything in the background for you, even now. And again, not altering the breathing at all, but using the lead of your breath. Focus on the bottom of your toes, the tips of your toes. And just breathing into that area, holding on to the lead of your breath, focusing nowhere else. And already maybe your mind has started to wander, a bit like the leaky pot we talked about, and that's okay. Just notice and then come back to the lead of your breath. And it can be sometimes helpful breathing in to that area and visualizing just comfort and calm. And exhaling, breathing out, the opposite, discomfort and tension. And now with the lead of your breath, taking your breathing from your toes all the way up to your knees. So deeper breathing, not a lot. And again applying the calmness, the comfort on the breath in. And the breath out, taking away any tension, any discomfort. And just taking a moment again, just being mindful of all that your breath does. And leading again with that breathing, a deeper breath again, a deeper inhale from your toes all the way up to your upper chest. So breathing all the way from your toes up to your upper chest. And again, with that deeper breath, more comfort, more calm. And on the out breath, removing any discomfort or tension. And again, you've maybe noticed some thoughts, some inner chat. Perhaps maybe you're feeling uncomfortable sitting in this position, and again, maybe the body wants to readjust and move, and that's fine. Reminding yourself, you're just noticing, you're practicing awareness. But you're leading with your breath. And finally, allowing the lead of your breath with a lovely deep inhale, a lovely deep inward breath, all the way from your toes to the crown of your head. And only breathing in as deep as is comfortable for you. And again, imagining, visualizing even comfort and calm on the in-breath. And removing any discomfort or tension on your out-breath. And just in a moment, we are going to readjust our position. We're going to open our eyes. But just like before, I'm going to invite you to allow a little amount of light in through the bottom of your eyelid. And then just when you're ready, just allow yourself to kind of move, just to kind of readjust your position. And again, if your eyes have stayed opened, just give them a few blinks. And again, a stretch, a yawn can sometimes be quite helpful. You're just signalling to your brain that you are becoming aware again, and you are introducing the sight sense once again. I'm going to ask you, just in your own words, to capture in your mind's eye one word to describe how you feel right now? Just one word to describe that. Or on a scale of 0 to 10, and 10 feeling really tense and sore, and 0 not at all, what number would you give yourself? And again, that's just a great way of recognising if that type of approach, that type of practice works for you. And you don't need to have somebody guide you with this as well. There's lots out there on YouTube, and as Evelyn had said at the beginning, I'll share a suggested further reading, which includes all of that. Sometimes simply just music can be quite nice. Again, what's lovely is this is all about choice. You get to choose what helps you to practice that breathing, so that you can then take that nice memory of knowing that you score well when you do these things, and you feel a certain way, that you're then able to deploy it, use it, practice it, cultivate it into your day-to-day lifestyle and wellness. Okay, so just before we're about to finish up, I always like to remind folk that there's hundreds of ways you can build this into your everyday practice, and these, this list is not exhaustive. At the top, always when you wake up, remember that, tone the carpet, tone the floor. The minute you wake, you have a choice, and it's in all of that, with your thinking and all of your actions and all of how you feel, and also how much you're taking care of your physical body and checking in with your physical body, is obviously how that's going to feed out to your outside world. So the minute you open your eyes, and of course everything else in between. But for me, the second last one, travelling from home. When I was practicing this, often a lot of the classes were in the evening, and when I was trying to do the practice and the homework, if you like, in between, obviously I'd be coming to and from my work the next day. So going home on a motorway, the motorway that I drive home from, rather, there was always a sign that said, be aware of the deer. And as you're driving, and of course very cautious driving at that, but to me, I always thought, right, now when I see the deer sign, I'm going to breathe, right? So driving home, and I think every time I see that sign, I'm going to really do that conscious breathing. So I would do that conscious breath, put the radio off, the music off in the car, and just focus on my breathing from that sign straight to home, and automatically recognising that wee habit, that small change, physically the benefits of that, the cognitive benefits from that, the behavioural benefits from that, took me to that last bullet point, because that was my significant change, because family members actually were telling me that, goodness, what a difference, have you had a good day? And I'm thinking, well, actually it was hellish, but that couple of minutes of that practice on the way home absolutely helps, and it just really is great life skills and a great way to get into practicing. But again, all of this will be in your slide deck after the session, so hopefully these will be things you'll find helpful, and also add to these yourself. So that leads us to the very end, and I just want to thank you guys for joining in the session, and hopefully you have been present, and there's maybe even just one thing in this session that you find useful for you to start today, practice more of today. So thank you.
And thank you so much, Anne. Wow, what a wonderful way to start an afternoon. I think my word is calm, and I'm number 9 on the scale. So anything, I can approach anything this afternoon. So thank you so much. So if anybody has a question, we have about 10 minutes left. If anybody has a question for Anne, pop it in the chat function, or if you want to raise a hand and speak to Anne. But really, with regards to the things that I got out of this today, and just while we're waiting in some questions, is, really to acknowledge what's on my plate today, what is being dished up, and, think about that inner running commentary, what's, to dial it down. And a great thing you said there, have a choice. We all have a choice, and be present. Sharpen your awareness and notice and focus on your physical body, but also be in tune with your physical breath as well. So that was a kind of the key takeaways that I have certainly taken from today. So would anybody like to take the opportunity to ask Anne a question? As I said, via the chat, or put your hand up. So while we're waiting for questions, I've got one, Anne, and it's the fact you were talking about, and I mentioned at the beginning, from a clinical background and for the work you've done in mental health. What made you, because obviously you've got a passion for wellbeing and individuals and businesses as well. So what was the buzzword just now is pivoting, pivot from one thing to another. What was the pivoting moment that made you do that?
Sure, yeah. So almost, I think, 27 years I've been within mental health. And for me, having worked I was actually working on a course accredited by Glasgow University in NHS, and it was a professor I was working with there. And we actually were working on various projects, and he had a separate business. So worked a lot with him on that, as well as still working in NHS. So maybe to summarise that, the best way I would say is having never, other than in the NHS world, the clinical world, having never really seen the kind of business, the commercial side to that, working with him on various projects gave me that kind of dipping my toe in the water to see what it was like. But very quickly what you recognise is that, like anything in life, you know, you think, oh God, actually I can do that. There's other things I can do and quite enjoy. And as you've probably gathered, I love to talk. So, and I love people. So I kind of thought, well, this is quite nice. This is very different to me. But crucially, what I loved was this doesn't need to be kept only in the parameters of health settings, traditional health settings and clinical settings. To me, you know, get ahead of that curve and really and truly look more on a prevention side and a proactive side. So that really got me thinking, and I thought, you know, these are just good things for folk in general, you know, to learn, and crucially not just when there's a problem that crops up, or worse, that it becomes a chronic health difficulty for that individual. So having worked with that company, I actually ended up leaving NHS and working full time and helping to kind of run and operate that. So like probably almost folk that are joining on the call here, you then very quickly become so many other feathers in your cap and learning how to do so much other things that is starting out as a nurse I would never have done. And so to present day, I love it. I really love it, because it's still, you know, registered clinically, and I still have a small caseload clinically in order to keep myself up to date with all of those kind of things. But for me, working more business and commercially, it's great, because I feel as if there's a whole other world out there, and it's great. It really is, because it's good to be able to take these approaches, these life lessons, and look at all the different areas of business and the world that's out with NHS, and recognise these same skills and tools work wonders applied in these areas too.
Thank you, Anne. I do appreciate that. So does anybody have a question for Anne before we finish? So Alan, I think you got a question there.
Yeah, I was just wondering, thank you very much, and I found that really useful, and I actually really took a lot from just turning off for a few minutes there as well, and just focusing on my breathing in particular. I found that really, really effective. I'm just wondering, when you've tried to roll this out with maybe teams that you've worked with in the past, you know, what is the best way to approach this in terms of, you know, bringing this topic in to chat to your teams, and then also beginning to encourage the good techniques and using these techniques to help your team, and also if you've met much resistance, you know, how have you began to overcome those things as you've been rolling it out?
Yeah, well, I think the first step is not to go in and let folk know you're a mental health nurse and a therapist. Otherwise, often they're kind of really put off. But from the clinical point, but in all seriousness, for me, it really is being able to go in and listen to that culture, listen to that team, listen to those individuals first, and really ask, you know, what is it? Why is it? What is it you're looking for? Why is it you've kind of got in touch? All of that, really get an idea and on top of what the team's like, what the culture's like. And then for me, it's just about bringing choice. So I am not there to kind of, win over people and such and force things by any manner of means on individuals. This is very much a personable thing, and it's absolutely not for everybody. And so for me, it really is taking and finding out like what works for you just now, or what worked in the past that maybe you're not doing just now. So it's not absolutely everything brand new. What you tend to find is there'll be a lot of things that individuals and teams have done in the past that's actually been really good, but perhaps it's just fell by the wayside, or perhaps there was just ways in setting that up in terms of wellbeing that just there was not enough there in order to get it off and running and sustain it. So sometimes it's just revisiting maybe the old and looking, right, okay, they were good, how can we work on that? But also sometimes it is actually for teams and individuals that have never heard of these approaches and just coming in almost a bit like with a menu card and saying, these are all the things we can look at as a team or as individually. So one organisation I'm working with just now, we've actually gone from the physical environment, so kind of helping with them to look at different corners of their office and looking and thinking and helping to generate, so the physical, the interior side of that in terms of these tools and skills to actually practical application. But one nice thing that came out of that is actually individuals have taken on their own onus with that to bring in, it could have been a podcast they've listened to that week, a book that they've been reading, whatever it has, a song that they've listened to in the radio, and we actually have a communication channel where that's all put up and shared through that too. So it can be as small as it can be as creative if you like. But to me, it really is going in and listening first and then being able to think, right, how might this fit for you and offer choice.
That's brilliant. No, thank you very much.
Thank you. That's really good. Thank you for the question, Alan. So does anybody else have any questions before we close? Anything? Well, just would like to thank you so much, Anne, and everybody for taking the time today. And Anne, you touched on there about reading podcasts and listening to or reading books, etc. So as you shared, you're going to be sending us a book list and some of your favourite podcasts as well. You talked earlier about sleeping. So I know obviously sleeping or a sleep pattern is very, very important. And so I think you're going to share some stuff on sleeping as well, which would really benefit. And also you'll get a copy of the slides, and this session has been recorded, so you can go back and do your meditation and listen to Anne again. But thank you again. Have a lovely afternoon. Have a lovely rest of the afternoon. And thank you so much for all your support.